Shall we start? Okay. Good evening. So, how is the Azure Bootcamp so far? So, how is your Azure experience for the whole day? It's quite good. Okay. So, how many of you participated in the last event as well? How many of you? Okay, only few. So that's better if we can communicate and collaborate in the session. So as all of you, I am also a bit sleepy. So you also can talk with me. Okay, so today I'm going to talk about the Azure functions and how we can deploy a Azure function in Visual Studio Code. And I'm going to use Python to develop the Azure function. So how many of you are open source lovers, Python developers? How many of you have any experience in Python? You can raise your hands like this with more confidence. No one? No one know about Python? .NET? Okay. So this is about me. I'm Hansamali Gamage. So how many of you are using Azure functions in your day-to-day work, maybe in your projects, maybe in your organization? No one is using Azure functions. Have you ever tried just going through the Azure portal to create a new function? No one. So how many of you have an Azure subscription? Okay. So if you don't have Azure subscription, you can sign up for a free account, right? With your, like, if you are a university student, you can verify your student ID and then get some free credits. Okay, so this we have something called Azure. In Azure, you know, it's a cloud platform. So we do have something called Azure serverless architecture. So in serverless means, what does it mean to be serverless? Serverless means we don't want to maintain a server to host something. Serverless. So you don't. So if you are using these Azure functions, or if you are using Azure serverless architecture in your applications, you don't have to worry about maintaining a server, doing configurations, operating system, any patches, updates, nothing. You don't have to worry about the server side. So it will be managed by the Azure. You only have to worry about your function implementation, the code you are writing. So that's what the Azure serverless architecture is. So under Azure serverless architecture, we can find Azure functions and logic apps and Azure event grid. So those are three separate services Azure offers: Azure functions, event grid, and logic apps. So today we are talking about Azure function. So what is a function? What is a method? So I hope all of you have written a method, right? So hello world, the first method we are writing. So that's the same thing. A function is equal to a method. So all of you have written a method. So that means that then it will be easy for you to know about this and experience about the function, Azure function. So we are going to write some lines of code, kind of chunk of code, and we are trying to deploy it into Azure. So in the Azure function, so that's what Azure function is. In Azure function, we are writing piece of code, a chunk of code, and hosting that function, that method in Azure. So do you now, I think you have gone for like 5-6 sessions. So in there you have learned many Azure services, right? So with Azure functions, you can integrate those Azure services plus any other third-party services as well. That's what the service integration is. So can you name me a few Azure services you have learned today? So Azure storage. So you can store your images, if you want to store any files or anything, you can use Azure storage. So you can integrate Azure storage with Azure function. So Azure SQL databases, you know about Azure SQL databases, and Azure Cosmos DB if you are into NoSQL, and if you want to go with the graph queries and those things, you can go for Azure Cosmos DB. So you can integrate Azure Cosmos DB service with the Azure function. So those are the service integration. And any of you have experience in Twilio SMS API? Twilio SMS API. So you can integrate Twilio SMS API, SendGrid to maintain the email templates and those things. So you can integrate those SendGrid, Twilio SMS API like maybe the third-party APIs with Azure functions. Okay. And languages it supports. It supports for C#, so all of you know about C#, and F#, JavaScript, and under experimental languages it has PHP, Python, so Bash for PowerShell, those things as well. So we are going to, today we are going to create a Python function and trying to deploy it into Azure. So when it comes to pricing, so the pricing is like the most important factor for organization, for an individual person as well, right? So if you want your function to run in Azure cloud, so then you have to think about the pricing, how much money, how much cost it will go out from my pocket. So that's what the concern is, right? So in Azure, this pricing model, so we do have something called consumption plan and app service plan. So any of you have deployed a Azure application, any of you have deployed a web application to Azure? Any of you? Okay, so in there, when you are trying to deploy a web application, maybe written in .NET to Azure, you have to select app service plan, right? So that app service plan is available in a particular region. So you are going with, okay, I'm going with Southeast Asia region. So for the Southeast Asia region, you are creating an app service plan. Under that app service plan, you are hosting your web application. So same as that, for the function, to host your function, you can go for that kind of app service plan. So maybe that app service plan is shared by your web applications, your API applications, your mobile applications, and you can host the same, the developed Azure function also in the same app service plan, right? Or else you can go for a dedicated plan like consumption plan. So in the consumption plan, the beauty thing is, so it will cost your money only for the computational resources that function is going to consume, only for the time that function runs. So let's say you are writing Azure function to send emails, right? So that email service doesn't need to be up always. Maybe you are sending emails only at the end of the month for your clients. In the other like 28 days, you don't want to have that email service up and running. So only for the end of the month. Then you can create a Azure function in a consumption plan. So in that, then only for the time that Azure function runs only, it will cost your money. But if you go with the app service plan and host your Azure function in there, so app service plan will be always online. So then, but if it is shared with your web applications, your mobile application, that's fine. But so if not, like, it's maybe a waste, right? Okay, so those are the pricing options we can go for in Azure function. So today we are going to talk about some sample codes and some demonstration. So in there, what I am going to do is I am going to, it's like an order processing system. Let's say in your company you have a separate IT division. So they are going to maintain the devices, maybe your PCs, upgrades and Windows versions and this and that. Maybe if you want to request for a high-end PC, or if you want to request for another 8 GB of memory, 8 GB of RAM, you have to make a request to the IT department. Then only they will process that based on the priority. They will allocate you that RAM or maybe the hard drive. So that's what happens normally, right? So in earlier days, so if you think like in earlier, like maybe one and a half year back, if you want to automate this thing, so you can log into a system and you can enter some, you can enter your request, like I want to have 8 GB of RAM and I am staying in this second floor, so I want to get 8 GB of RAM into my PC. So you are submitting that request. Maybe that goes to a database. So you have to develop a web interface to catch the inputs. So those are stored in a database, and the IT department guys will check the database and process your request. So that's what the normal web application way, right? But instead of going there, what we can do is we can create a simple function and host that in Azure. So that's what we are going to do in today. Okay. Okay. So yeah. So this is the kind of architecture I have drawn for this system. So let's say this is the function. So in the blue box, it shows the function, the method you are writing, the function you are writing, and hosted in Azure. So your clients, so your users will be sending their requests, sending their what they want and where they are, and that calls by a HTTP, something called HTTP trigger. You know HTTP request, right? So that kind of a HTTP request we are passing to the function. So /API/order trigger is my endpoint. Then that order will be stored not in a database, in the queue storage. So if you know about the Azure storage, in Azure storage you can store files, queues, blobs, so your images, your profile images, those kind of things you can store. So part of that is queues. So you can create Azure storage account, you can store blobs or files or tables or queues. So we are going to save that order in the queue storage. Right, my data structure will be item and the location. So no need to have a database table. So we can use the queue storage. Okay. Yeah, so I will run the demo. So all of you have installed Visual Studio Code in your machines? how many of you have installed Visual Studio Code in your machines? Okay, so that means you are developing so Angular or okay. So I will. I think if you haven't installed these Azure extensions, you will not be able to see this Azure Blade on Visual Studio Code, right? So I have installed this necessary Azure extension, so I can see the Azure Blade in here, right? So I will go there. So these are my Azure subscriptions available. So I will try to create a function, right? So first of all, I have to create a new project. So I will create a new project. So I am creating a folder. So I have given a location to save my project. So you have the option to select a language to create this Azure function. Okay, you can select C#, JavaScript, TypeScript or else Python. So I will select Python. And you have certain things, you have something called triggers in Azure function. So in triggers means, so this HTTP trigger is fired when you are going to send a HTTP request to the function. So if you go with Azure Blob Storage trigger, so when something happens, when some modification happens in your storage account, in your blob storage, this thing fires up. Right? Let's say you have a blob storage account. So you are going to insert a new profile picture, new picture into there. So the blob storage has been changed. So this blob storage trigger will fire up. So likewise for the Cosmos DB trigger, if you are going to do any modifications in the Cosmos database, so this trigger will fire up. So in this demonstration, what we want to use is HTTP trigger. That means when you get a HTTP request, so I want to do I want to execute my function, right? So let's select the HTTP trigger. So we can give a name to this HTTP trigger. Let's say order trigger. And you have to give, you can give authorization level. You can go for the anonymous, function or admin authorization level. For the time being, I will go with the easiest one, the anonymous. So anyone can send a request to my function I have hosted in Azure using HTTP request. So I will go with anonymous and I will say open in current window. So now it's going to create the function. So meantime, if you have any questions, you can ask from me. And also at the end, I am going to ask a question. So you will be getting a surprise gift at the end of the day. Okay. Yeah. So my function has been created. So I have to install this pylint extension. So I will install that. It's going to actually check for the Python syntax errors. So I will install that one. So if you see the solution, so you can see, so we have given the name as order trigger. Inside there, this Python file has been created. And apart from that, we have some other files as well. I will explain what are they. So if you see this, the Python file, so I will not go into detail in the code. So instead of that, I will run this one. So you can go to the debug. I think you are expert in Visual Studio Code, so because of that, I don't have to explain how to debug and all. So in the terminal, you can see the function the function we have created is running, right? Sorry, I think then you can see this URL. So this is the HTTP request that has been created. So let's try to, I will control click. So I am calling this function from the HTTP request. So that means we have created HTTP trigger. So if I pass HTTP request, that will be able to execute my function. So when I call that function through this HTTP request, it shows me something like this, right? So let's see what is that. So it's actually it's going to check for the parameters. So you know, with the HTTP request, we can pass query strings in the request header, right? So we haven't passed any query string parameters here, right? So because of that, it will not be able to find any query string parameters, request parameters. So it directly goes to the else statement and it shows this message in the browser like this. So if I go to the terminal, so it will give me 400 because we haven't passed. It will give me 400 because we haven't passed any query string or any parameters. Okay, so can you get what I am doing? So then I will pass, what I have to pass is, now you can tell me. So if I want to execute the if statement, right, I should have the name. So that means we have to pass the name in the name as the request parameter, so in the query string. So I will try to pass the name here. I will pass my name. Then you can see this hello message, right? Okay, so that's the simplest function we have created. Now what I will do is I will modify this quickly. So I will copy this whole thing. Save. Okay. So in here, what I am going to check is I am going in the request parameters. So that means in the query string, I am checking for the order and location parameters. Okay. So if I couldn't find any order information, I am going to read the request body, right? Or else I am going to read the request body and get the order and location parameters in the JSON format and assign them to order and location variable. Okay, so I am going to pick the query string parameters for the order and location. If they are not found, I am going to check the request body. So that means we can call this endpoint, the HTTP trigger we created, this one, using post as well, by passing the request, by passing the parameters in the request body. Okay. Then if we could find order and location information, I am going to add this order request, the order items and the order location, those information into the queue storage. So that queue storage has been passed in the method parameters as the output queue, right? So we have given the output queue with the HTTP request, and we are going to set that order and location into the output queue, right? Or else it will show this message. Okay. Then I will try to run this one, but the thing is, so I told you about this so if we go to this slide, so we created a Azure function in Python. So what is the service we integrated with this function? So we have a function, that's HTTP trigger function, the simplest function you can write, and we integrated one service with that HTTP trigger. What is that? We are saving the saving this information to the queue, right? So we integrated Azure storage. We integrated Azure storage, or we can say we integrated the queue storage in our function. And for the trigger we used what? We used HTTP trigger. And for the actually that service integration happened as a binding. We have a function, we can input something or else we can output something from the function. Normally in a method, we can input something and output something. So for the function, we have something called binding. So we can have some input parameters to the function, those are input bindings. So we can do some, we can output something, so those are the output binding. So we got order and the location information in the request body or in the query string. So process that and also saved that into queue storage. So what is the so is that a queue storage? Is that the input binding or the output binding? How many of you are telling that's input binding is? So you have to select either input or output. So how many of you are telling this is the so I will show you the diagram. So this is our function and we are saving our order information in the queue. So we have, for the function we can have input bindings and output bindings. So the queue is the input binding or else output binding. How many of you are telling input binding is? Output binding? Okay, so that's output binding. Okay, so in the code, in the this Python file, we are setting this as the this as the output binding. But this output queue, we have to tell where this output queue is located. So for the if you are connecting with if you are talking with the database, you have to set the connection string, no? as same as that, we have to tell where this output queue is situated. It's in a cloud or in where, right? So I will add that configurations as well. So you have to go to the function JSON. So in here you can see we selected the authorization level as anonymous, and we use the HTTP trigger, and that HTTP trigger is input binding. That's the input for the function. So that's why it says that's why it says the direction as in for the HTTP trigger. Okay. Yeah. Then you can request this HTTP trigger with get or post. Get with the query string, post in the request body. So I will pass the output queue as well into here. So I have to pass the same name here, right? You have to pass the same name, output queue, that's a queue type, and that's the out parameter. And the connection is my storage connection string. So that means the same as the database connection string. So I have to pass the my storage connection string as well. So you have to pass this in the local settings file. Okay. So yeah, all okay now. So I will try to now I will try to debug this one for once. Okay, queue, it says the binding type queues are not registered. Please ensure the type is correct and the bindings are correct and the binding extension is installed. So we have to manually install the binding extensions with this command. So I will install the queue extension. Okay, then I will run this again. So it works fine. So now let's try to deploy this to Azure. So you have to run into Azure Blade again. So you can select deploy to function app, and you can select your subscription, and you can create new function app in the Azure. So I will say Azure Bootcamp. Oh, it's already exist. 2019, that's already exist. So I will say demo. So then it's going to create the resource group. You know about the resource group in Azure? How many of you know about the Azure resource group? So that's kind of a virtual kind of a folder. In your file explorer you have folders. Inside there you have your files, maybe your pictures and all. So in Azure also you can create a resource group, and inside there you can host your web application. You can put your function or databases. So either with one click you can delete all of the resources available in that folder, available in that resource group. So it's creating the function app. So without waiting, I will go to the Azure portal and check. So this will take bit of time. So this is one of the function app I have created. So there, so you will be able to see the function. This is the test trigger. Test trigger is my HTTP trigger function I have created. So in here, you can get the function URL, and so when you click this, when you go to this without any parameters in the query string or in the request body, it will give this message. Then I will pass the order and the location information. So I will say I want new 8 GB RAM, and the location is I am staying in the second floor. So then, okay, the order is submitted. So then I will go to the function app, and you will be able to see the in the configuration, you will be able to see the connection string to that queue storage. So it's the my storage connection string we set up in the Visual Studio Code, if you could remember this one. So it has pointed to the account name called my test123. So that means my Azure queue storage account. So I will quickly show that. So this is the storage account. So I have blobs, files, tables, and I used queues. So if I go there, this is the items queue. If you can remember, we set this as items queue, the queue name here. So it has been created. Inside there I should have my orders. So you can see the orders like this. Sorry. Like this. Okay, so yeah, so that's end of the demonstration. And actually, if you have missed something in the demo, you can refer to my blog. So I think at the end of the day you will be getting these PowerPoint slides, so you can refer to my blog. You will be able to see the step-by-step guide I have created, and I have created a small YouTube video as well. Sorry, I will quickly go to the, oh sorry, I couldn't. This is the blog I have created. So you will be able to see the step-by-step guidelines, and here, sorry, yeah, in the, this is the playlist for the Azure function. So you will be get some help from the video as well. And this Python project is available in my GitHub account. So you will be getting these links with the PowerPoint slide actually. So this is the Python project we have created here. Yeah, so then if you have any questions, you can ask from me. And also I want your feedback as well for my session. So I think you are familiar with this procedure. So what you have to do is you have to scan this QR code, then you will get a form, so you can enter your name and email and the rating and your feedback. So you will get an email to the email you have entered, and please confirm that email, otherwise I will not get your feedback. So you have to authorize yourself to give me your feedback. And I have to ask a question from you as well. So can you name me what is the output binding we used for this demo? Can you tell me? Yeah, storage queue. You have to, sorry for the others, you have to write your name and the number in the tag. So if you have any questions, you can ask from me. So did you learn anything new? So if you are not, you didn't raise your hands when I'm asking, do you have any experience in the Azure function? So did you learn something from this session? So then that I can be happy. So if you could learn something new. Okay, thank you. Okay, so that's all. Thank you very much for joining my session.